Hello everyone and welcome back. If you caught the last video, you saw how to pull your active English learner data from eSchool and get it into your EasyDoc spreadsheet. Today we're going to do the same thing but for your monitoring students, the students who have exited the ELL program and are in their monitoring years. The process is very similar, but there are a few key differences I want to point out. So let's jump in. Don't forget that you also have the screen shots of the exact fields that you need to put in eSchool for your data search in your customer documents, so you can print that or have it with you when you are trying to build those fields. Just like before, we're going to log into eSchool and go to the student search, and we're going to click the advanced tab. Now here's where it's a little different from the active EL search. For monitoring students, we need to cast a wider net because we're looking for students across up to 4 monitoring years. So we're going to set up multiple criteria rows. I would suggest running this spreadsheet before updating your student status in eSchool. If you've already updated their status, it is okay. You will just need to manually enter any students who exited this year and completed their 4 years of monitoring, since monitoring complete students will not show up with the report that we're going to run. All right, just like last time, row 1 is our demographics. Current status equals active and ELL. Then our field name is ESL ELL monitored equals M1 monitored year 1. Now here's the important part. Rows 3, 4, and 5, we will use the word or. Row 3, or ELL, ESL, ELL monitored equals M2 or M3 or M4. Check that your criteria grouping should read 1 and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. That's telling eSchool to find active students who are in any of the 4 monitoring years, which is exactly what we want. Now scroll to your list field selection. And for monitoring students, you'll want these fields: grade, building, birth date, state reporting ID, ELL entry, exit start date, home language, ELL entry, exit end date, and ESL ELL monitored. Remember that you can look at that cheat sheet to see exactly which words you need in each area and field name in order to pull the data that you're looking for. If you will put the data in this order, it will make it very easy to copy and paste into your spreadsheet. Remember, once everything is set, you're going to click the load arrows at the top, and then it will generate your student data list, and you'll be able to download that Excel file. For student privacy reasons, I am not going to continue scrolling, but if I were to scroll down, I would be able to click the little paper icon with an X on it and download my spreadsheet. I then can open that spreadsheet and use it as an Excel file or upload it to my Google Drive where I can use it as a Google Sheets. All right, so now I'm going to open my LPAC EasyDoc spreadsheet and get everything set up the way that I want it on my monitoring spreadsheet. Same rules apply here. Do not change the column headers. Though if you find there's some columns you want to add, that would be fine, but you do not need to delete any of these or rename them. The first thing that I'm going to do is make sure I get the tabs the way that I want. I like to keep up with my tabs for the monitoring year. So I'm going to rename the first one as M1, and then I'm going to right-click duplicate that, and then I'm going to rename that to M2, and I'm going to continue until I have all the ones that I need for all 4 years of monitoring. I'm going to rename to M4. I am going to go ahead and create one for monitoring complete for my students who exited this school year, completed their 4 years of monitoring, because we like to celebrate them at a board meeting and I like to get them plaques and certificates. And so that way I know which students have just finished their 4 years. Just like in our other spreadsheet, I'm going to have a tab for new students. So that way, if I give the screener during the school year and I have students that score proficient on the screener, I can put them here and make sure that I process all their data before moving it to another field. Remember that you can copy a row of data and then paste it to the spreadsheet once you've dealt with it. And then I'm also going to have a tab for dropped students. That way I can keep my other spreadsheets clean. But if that student were to return to me, I could copy and paste their data right back to the spreadsheet that I need it. So now that I have my spreadsheet set up, I'm ready to start getting my other data to paste into here. Just like last time, before I start copying and pasting, I want to do some sorting and filtering so that way things will be where I want them. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze the first 3 rows. So I'm going to go View, Freeze up to row 3. This will allow me to scroll and keep that header at the top. I've also unmerged this top row, so that way I can also freeze the first column and keep the student names where I can easily see it. Next, I'm going to sort my data by the grade. Then I'm going to sort my data by the building. And then finally, I'm going to sort it by my monitoring status. Because I like to keep up with my students in what year of monitoring, this will make it easy for me to see each of my campuses at a glance and how many years of monitoring they have left. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get these students that say M1 are my students who are currently M1 because I haven't updated them in eSchool yet. So these are actually my future M2 students. So I'm going to come all the way down to row 25, and I'm going to highlight those names and hit Control C. And then I'm going to come to the M2 spreadsheet because these are my students who are about to become their second year of monitoring. I'm going to do Control Shift plus V, and I get their names. Because all of these are students who have already been monitoring, I'm going to choose Monitoring a Former English Learner. I can then copy that, and then I can paste it in all of those fields. If one of those students was a documentation of a prior exit that was not documented or initiating placement as a former English learner, you could also select that. For the ELPA assessment, you have ELPA 21 Screener, ELPA 21 Summative, Alt ELPA Screener, and Alt ELPA Summative. This can usually be found in Triand if you're not sure which test a student demonstrated proficiency on. Because all of these students are in my M1, M2, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it was the ELPA 21 Summative. Again, if I needed to, I could go into Triand, look these students up, and see which assessment it was that they scored proficient. Or I could look at other score reports or data places that I have for these students. The next thing I'm going to get off the spreadsheet, I should be able to get the next several columns because they're in the exact same order. So grade, school, birth date, state ID, entry date, home language, year exited, and current monitoring year. So for those 25 rows, I'm going to avoid the local state ID or the local ID, and then I'm going to start at the grade, building, birthday, state reporting ID, ELL exit date, home language, end date, and what year of monitoring they're in. Again, I'm going to Control Copy, come back over, click in that top box, Control Shift V, and then there is all of the data that I need for those students. I'm going to assume that all of these students have their 2 pieces of data. And so I'm going to mark that these are now all M2 students, that is my recommendation for next year. If, however, I start looking for my 2 pieces of data and I cannot find evidence for them, then I would know that that student would need to return as an English learner. But now that I have my spreadsheet set up, I can start looking for my data point, look for my data source, get that score, and then put the date that they did that. And again, I can do that for their 2 different sources, looking at Atlas data, beginning of year screeners, CFAs, and other standardized assessments, trying to find the evidence that they're performing on the level of their English-only peers. Remember that if you have a student that scored proficient on the Alt-ELPA screener or Alt-ELPA summative, you only need to have one data source for that student. And again, if you cannot find any reason to show that they're performing at the level of their peers, you can mark that they will need to return as an English learner the next year. So that got my M2 students. I would then go and do the same thing for those students who say M2, but will become my M3 students. So again, I would highlight the names, and then I would highlight all those data fields, and then using Control plus Shift plus V, I would paste that into my spreadsheet. For my M1 students, these are going to be my students who just scored proficient on this year's assessment. So the reason for this form is going to be initiating placement as a former English learner. For most of these students, it will be the ELPA 21 summative. However, when we start the school year back in August, you might have students that score proficient on the screener, and you can note that there. You'll be able to then get all that other data either from your eSchool spreadsheet that you have run or wherever else you are keeping that student's evidence. Once I have my spreadsheet set up with all my data and my data points, I'm now ready to import this into the LPAC EasyDocs monitoring tool. Remember that you will go File, Download, Comma-Separated Values, that's a CSV file, and that this will then be the file that you will upload into your LPAC EasyDocs hub with the monitoring tool. And that's the monitoring student import. The big things to remember that are different from the active EL search, you're using those OR connectors in eSchool to catch all foreigner monitoring years at once. And in the template, the reason for the form, the ELPA assessment, and monitoring year fields all need to match the drop-down text exactly. So use those drop-downs whenever you can. Once you've done both your active EL import and your monitoring import, you're in great shape for the year. Remember, at that point, you just have to keep up with new students and students that drop. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email and reach out, and we wish you the best of luck getting your data processed for this year, and we hope that EasyDocs can simplify your ELL paperwork processes.